When is the last time that you talked to your neighbors just because you wanted to chat? Was it last summer for 4th of July cookout? Was it last Wednesday? Maybe you've never talked to your neighbors. Do you know their names? I want you to turn to the person sitting next to you and discuss this for a few seconds. I'm loving all the conversations that I was hearing. Sounds very productive. Talking to somebody new for the first time can oftentimes be taxing and difficult to initiate. For those of you who said you know your neighbors, I want you to reflect. Is this due to your neighborhood culture or because you're an outgoing person yourself? Whether or not you're an outgoing person, we all sometimes have to take difficult social risks. I watched a few TED Talks before I began writing this, and from what I could tell, pretty much none of them had audience participation. So this was a big risk for me to take, but it turned out okay, and it was worth it because I wanted to demonstrate the idea of how greater risk can lead to greater connection. When placed in a new setting, whether we're sitting here in the Rancho Capana Pack or at a party with our friends, we tend to only talk to people that we already know. Oftentimes, new connections are only made through mutual friends, through the act of introducing one person to the next. Individuals who seemingly have a lot of friends and people around them are repeatedly reporting higher levels of loneliness. We, as a society, are creating the social divide. And the truth is, we are living in a loneliness epidemic. And I know the word epidemic may sound a bit harsh and possibly triggering to every single one of us in this room who survived a worldwide pandemic in 2020. But our current US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, uses the word epidemic to describe the sudden onset of decreased social interaction seen especially in teenage individuals. And I want to emphasize the fact that teenagers specifically are singled out in this national statistic. Being a high school student myself, I see the hesitation for social interaction on a daily basis, with many of my peers expressing that they feel lonely, but just don't know what to do about it. But let's get back to that later. Right now, we're going to talk about my neighborhood. I know every single person who lives on my street. Just the other day, I began walking up the hill that I live on, and one of my neighbors saw me, told me to wait, and rushed back out of his house a moment later with his golf cart, telling me that he would give me a ride to wherever I was going. This may also be an appropriate time to mention that he's only 9 years old and has just been given the permission to drive a golf cart. He's very excited. Although a funny and seemingly random story, this kind of stuff happens all the time where I live, with many of my neighbors relying on each other in ways that we've been told are uncommon for modern day society. I began working for my neighbors when I was around 9 or 10 years old. What began as simple house-sitting tasks quickly evolved into an elaborate weekly schedule with lots of colored ink filling up the squares of my calendar. This not only taught me responsibility and time management, but more significantly, enfolded me into the caring neighborhood in which I live. This is when I first began realizing that a tight-knit, supportive community can be made almost anywhere with enough deliberate effort and focused energy. And if I had never taken that social risk of asking my neighbor if they needed a house sitter while they were away on vacation, I'm just not sure that I'd have such strong and long-lasting bonds with them to this day. Personally, I'm somebody who loves making connections and branching out, and I've spent some time pondering why this is. Of course, we could chalk it up to being an extrovert and call it a day. That would be easy. Or we could try to dive down a little and figure out why. My mother used to always tell me that a person cannot branch out without first having firm and strong roots. And as a kid, I would always brush this off. Yeah, whatever, Mom. I've heard all of your gardening analogies before. But then, I got a little older, and I just started to become so fed up with the lack of social interaction I was seeing between kids my age. And then I started to realize that maybe she was right. My neighborhood forms my root system, and these roots have grounded me and allowed me to stretch out, extending my leaves and branches. These roots have also allowed me to take social risks, like talking to somebody new for the first time. If it goes poorly, it really doesn't matter just because I have my people at home that I can fall back to. For example, last year in one of my math classes, I was sat next to somebody who I didn't really know very well, but she and I quickly became good friends. She and I were chatting along one day, as we usually do, and she asked me how I knew so many people on campus. And at the time, I was sort of baffled by this question. I mean, how did she not? I just talked to them like she and I were talking in that moment. But then it occurred to me that if I had not initiated contact that very first day of class or taken that risk, we may not have talked all trimester, despite sitting a mere 16 inches away from each other, 1 hour a day for 12 weeks. These lonely times are difficult. They're difficult and they are frustrating. I think a lot of us blame the pandemic for the lack of socialization. 4 years ago, we were told to isolate and socially distance, which sounds a little crazy now with some perspective. But now, in 2024, we need to do the opposite of quarantine. We need to come together to break through this loneliness epidemic. So, I need you guys to do something for me. The next time you find yourself in a setting where maybe you don't know so many people, I need you to put down that phone. Put down that phone and go talk to somebody new for the first time. It's rough, I'm not gonna lie. And it's daunting and it's difficult, but it has to be done. Even something as small as a compliment on somebody's shoes can break the ice and start a conversation. So, take a risk and make a friend.